Hi there, my name's Paul Sargent, and we're going to continue our study of the Constitution by looking at how they went about creating a new government in the Constitutional Convention. Now, the Constitutional Convention has often been called a series of compromises, and that's really sort of where we're going to start. So let's take a look at what happened. Well, the delegates decided that they were going to meet in Philadelphia, and this is in 1787. That just moved that around. We just have to do a couple things. There we go. So they decided to meet in 1787. And the idea is that they were going to meet for what they called the sole purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. But, of course, what they realized, and this was really a weakness of the Articles of Confederation, if you aren't familiar with the weaknesses, go back to my Articles of Confederation notes, but it was this unanimous consent, which is a real problem. Now, this is hard to get when only 12 states show up, and there are 13 states. Rhode Island doesn't show up at all, so you're not going to get that. So Rhode Island is not there, and so you have the 55 delegates who eventually show up. Some of them are running a little bit late, and they begin writing an entirely new constitution, and that new constitution is going to really lead to a new government for the United States of America, which is going to be more centralized than the Articles of Confederation. All right, so here they all are. Here's the signing. There's someone signing them. You know, they add the prestige by putting this guy, George Washington, as the head of the whole thing. Benjamin Franklin is there. Alexander Hamilton is there. James Madison is there. Some of the big names. And they're there trying to write this out. Now, this scene is perhaps a little bit more glorified, and we tried to romanticize the whole moment. But you get, So here's like the basic philosophy behind the entire thing, okay? All the members agreed on a few things. First of all, they agreed on really human nature, that people would tend to act in their self-interest, and a good government had to be able to rein in the self-interests of people. They agreed on the causes of political conflict, that oftentimes it had to do with the unequal distribution of property, which is a very common cause of conflict. And they agreed on the object and nature of Republican government. Now, Republican, of course, means that it's a government of the people, but people elect representatives. So we're not talking like Republican with a big R, with Republicans versus Democrats or anything like that. And so what they decided and what they knew is that you have government because what it does is it checks and constrains or contains the natural self-interest of people. People are going to try and work to improve their own situation, to do what's best for them. Government must be able to step in and say, maybe what's best for you isn't best for everybody. James Madison becomes the most influential guy there. He actually is considered the father of the Constitution and the architect because he comes with a draft copy, and no other people really do. Anyway, he's basing his ideas on two things. First of all, here's your distribution of wealth. That's the source of most conflict. And if you have unequal distribution, there's going to be factions that arise, mostly those who have and those who don't have. And if you have a minority or majority faction, then you have this power, you have this possibility, I should say, of tyranny, where they use their numbers in order to sort of hurt the other if they're unchecked. You got to protect property. That is big because most people don't have as much, and so they might want to divide up what people have. And you have to have a balanced government because that stops faction control. So what were the major issues? Well, there was representation. They had to deal with slavery, which half the states had slavery, half didn't. You had to deal with the questions of equality among people and among the states, economic issues, including that property rights thing, and what individual rights are you going to write into the Constitution. This is the number one, this is the most important issue that was there, and it took the longest time for people to figure out how are states going to be represented in the new government. Well, two plans are really put forth, and they look at the two different sides of what was going on in the colonies. Number one is the New Jersey plan, which is put forth by William Patterson, and in it there would be one house it would have, in that one house, much like the Articles of Confederation, every state would have equal representation. Well, Virginia wasn't too big on that because they had more people in Virginia than any other colony or any other state. And so Edmund Randolph puts forth the Virginia Plan and says, hey, you know what? Let's base it on population. That's much more important. So they argue. Along comes the Connecticut Compromise. And the Connecticut Compromise creates what we have today. There's a bicameral legislature. In the Senate, there are 2 members from each state, and that is your New Jersey plan. In the House, representation is based on population. That's the Virginia plan. How about this for a compromise? They check it off, they give it their stamp of approval, and they move on to things. Slavery, big problem. All right. They are able to agree on the importation of slaves, although they put a 20-year hiatus on this. So after 20 years, Congress could ban this, but that gives slave owners time to adjust and to prepare for it. They did not prohibit slavery. In fact, they don't even mention it. There is a fugitive slave clause in there that people legally held to service or labor, because they don't use the word slave, who escaped to free states had to be returned to their owners. Although, it's sort of like got iffy enforcement. So, it isn't all that effective. And this is the big one, the 3/5 compromise. When it comes to representation, when it comes to taxation, they decided that slaves were not going to be counted as full people, that they were going to be counted as 3/5 of a full person. And that's still in the Constitution. They then tackled political equality. Like, what is it that you're going to do? Who can vote? All of that. There are those who come out and say, hey, there should be universal male suffrage. And when we say suffrage, that equals the vote. So every male should be able to vote. And, let's be honest, they're really talking about this. Free adult white males. No one's talking about slaves. No one's talking about children. No one's talking about free blacks. This is free adult white males. Oh yeah, no one's talking about women. There are those who wanted to have property qualifications, which is something that people always have a question about. Students do. Why would you have property qualifications? Well, the reasoning goes simply like this. Congress is going to vote to tax property somewhere along the lines. Okay. And so if you have property that's being taxed and you have people who don't own property, then they can just say, yeah, go ahead, and all of a sudden, it doesn't affect them at all. So why not limit it to property owners who are going to be the ones who will be taxed if they vote for a tax? Well, they decided to get rid of that, or at least they decided to not adopt that nationally because they couldn't figure anything out nationally. And so, in a very momentous move, they decided to leave the issue to the states. And this is a problem until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And you could argue it's a problem even today because some states are trying to have ID requirements, so you have to present identification in order to vote, which groups like the NAACP are saying unfairly disadvantage the people who don't have enough money or transportation to go and get ID. So we're still out there. Economic issues, very important to people with property, very clearly spelled out what Congress is to do. Congress is going to be the chief economic policymakers. They can tax, borrow, and appropriate funds. These are all things which the Articles of Confederation didn't allow them to do. And they protect property rights, both physical property but also intellectual property. They went further out and said, okay, we also have to say that states can't do certain things that would act against the economy. Like you can't have state monetary systems. Like states, you've been printing your own money? No longer. You can't charge duties on imports from other states, which they had been doing. And you can't interfere with lawfully contracted debts. So all of these things are denied. They also say that states have to require or to respect judgments, contracts, and slave ownership from other states. In other words, like a contract might be that marriage in one state has to be recognized in another state. They guarantee every state will have a Republican form of government with elected officials, and they go so far as to say that the government is going to pay all public debts since 1776, which they didn't have to do. But by doing so, they basically said to the rest of the world, we're going to honor the debts of the previous government so that in the future you'll be more likely to loan us. And finally, individual rights is something they have to look at. They thought this was really going to be pretty easy because they had created this limited government. So like if you tell government what it can do, then like it can't do anything else. And so therefore it could not threaten personal freedoms. Plus, they'd gone through and dispersed powers between the branches. You put in the checks and balances to restrain against one another. And number three, and most importantly, state constitutions already provided protections about this. And so they listed only a few. Number one, they listed the writ of habeas corpus. And it can only be suspended if there's an invasion or a rebellion. This means that if you are arrested, that you have the right to appear before a judge, and the judge will determine whether you were wrongfully arrested or rightfully arrested, and whether you can be detained. Without this, government can round people up, throw them into jail, leave them there without being charged forever. They said there would be no bills of attainder or ex post facto laws. These are laws that the British had used. A bill of attainder is basically a law that declares someone guilty of a crime and gives them a punishment, so it kind of takes over the judicial branch and the executive branch in a law. And ex post facto laws means that people who broke the law prior to the law being passed would be prosecuted for doing so. So you can't do that. They said there would be no religious qualification for holding office. They made a very, very narrow definition of treason. They guarantee the right to a jury trial. But this is very important to understand. Because there was no specific protections, this becomes a real problem. And this is going to be a problem that's going to lead to the rise of a group called the Anti-Federalists, who are going to call for a more detailed listing of individual rights. And, spoiler alert, this becomes the Bill of Rights in our current Constitution, the first 10 amendments. So basically, those are the compromises that happened at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. In our next video, we're going to take a look at the ratification process, because now that these things had been ironed out, they had to go and sell them to the states. So I'll see you next time for that, and hope this helped. So my name's Paul Sargent, and thanks for watching.